"Drop the cane or I will break it myself, old man." Despite his own warning, Officer Vincent Harlan did not wait. He tore the white and red cane from Elias Caldwell's hand and snapped it over his knee. The mahogany handle, shaped by his late wife to fit his grip, hit the pavement and skidded into the gutter. Then, in one brutal motion, Officer Harlan yanked Elias's arms back and cinched the cuffs tight around his wrists, shoving him toward the cruiser. Elias said nothing and complied because he had survived by knowing which battles to fight and where. What Officer Harlan did not know was that Elias's son had made a career of exposing moments like this. And somewhere beyond the reach of those closing cuffs, that reckoning was already beginning. Before we go on, tell me where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you simply cannot miss. The jacket was the first thing. Elias Caldwell always wore his good jacket on his regular morning outings, the dark navy one with the brass buttons that Eleanor had bought him for their anniversary. He had found it in the closet by feel, third hanger from the left always, and pulled it on slowly, smoothing the lapels the way he used to when he could still see himself in the mirror. He could not see anything now. The darkness had been with him for years, but he still smoothed the lapels. He stood at his apartment door on the 4th floor of a building on 118th Street in Harlem, New York, and did what he did every morning outing. He patted his coat pocket. Pharmacy list folded in thirds. Exact change for the barber shop. 4 20s, 2 5s, and 4 1s, organized by denomination the way Eleanor had taught him when the darkness first came. His white and red mobility cane leaned against the doorframe. He picked it up, feeling the smooth mahogany handle settle into his palm like a handshake from an old friend. Eleanor had made that handle, sanded it herself, fitted it to the exact curve of his grip. 2 years gone, and he still carried her every morning outing. Elias stepped into the hallway, pulled the door shut behind him, and began moving toward the elevator with the easy confidence of a man who had walked this same path countless times. Every bump in the carpet, every loose floorboard outside apartment 4C, he knew all of it. The darkness did not scare him anymore. The root was in his bones. Outside, October had arrived the way October does in New York. Sharp air, the smell of roasting nuts from a cart somewhere up the block, kids' voices cutting through the morning on their way to school. Elias's cane swept in steady arcs ahead of him as he turned south on Lenox Avenue, navigating the familiar cracked stretch of sidewalk near the corner where the city had been meaning to do repairs. "Morning, Mr. Elias," Clarence called out from behind his fruit stand, already arranging apples in neat rows. "Morning, Clarence," Elias said without breaking stride. "Your voice sounds tired. You sleep last night?" Clarence laughed. "Man, how do you do that?" Elias just smiled and kept walking. This was his neighborhood. He had been a principal at a school 6 blocks away for years. He had buried neighbors here and watched their grandchildren be born. He had walked these streets before the darkness came, and he had walked them after, and no one was going to tell him otherwise. He was 2 blocks from the pharmacy when he heard the car door. Not the sound itself, just the specific heaviness of it. The way a cruiser door closes differently from a regular car. Elias had learned to notice that. He kept walking, cane sweeping, not breaking his pace because he had nothing to break it for. "Hey." Elias kept walking. The voice had not specified a direction. "Hey, you." He stopped. He turned his head toward the sound. He kept his face calm. He kept his hands still. The officer was a short distance away. Elias could hear the boots on the pavement. Heavy, deliberate, closing the distance without hurry. The kind of walk that expected something. "Where are you going with that?" the officer said. Elias held the cane slightly out to the side so it was visible. "Morning, officer," he said. "I am visually impaired. This is a standard mobility cane. I am on my way to the pharmacy on 125th. He kept his voice even. He had learned that too over a lifetime. Keep the voice even. Give them nothing to grab onto. The officer stopped close. Too close. Elias could smell the coffee on him. You live around here? I do. 118th Street. I walk this route every morning outing. There was a pause. The kind of pause that is not really a pause. It is a decision being made. You got ID on you? Elias reached slowly into his interior pocket and produced his wallet. He held it out. The officer did not take it. What is your name? Elias Caldwell. Elias. The officer said it like it tasted like something he did not like. You want to tell me why you were swinging that thing around like you were about to hit somebody? Elias was quiet for one single second. I was navigating a broken stretch of sidewalk, he said, still calm, still even. That is what a cane does. The morning kept going around them. Clarence was still arranging apples up the block. A school bus rumbled past. The city did not notice or care. Sir, Elias said quietly, is there something I can help you with? The officer's name was Vincent Harlan, and he had already decided the answer was yes. Vincent Harlan had been a cop for years. He had 3 civilian complaints buried in his file like seeds that nobody wanted to water. He had a promotion he did not get recently, and a sergeant who had embarrassed him in the locker room in front of other officers. He had cold coffee in the cup holder of his cruiser and a chip on his shoulder the size of a city block. And right now he had Elias Caldwell standing in front of him on a public sidewalk. And something about that, about the way Elias stood, about the quiet dignity in the old man's posture, about the calm in his voice that refused to crack, was making Harlan's jaw tighten in a way he could not quite explain. Drop the stick, Harlan said. Elias did not move. Sir, this is a mobility aid. I am legally blind. Removing this cane leaves me without any means of... I said, drop it. Officer Ryan Whitaker, still new to the job, stood back near the passenger side of the cruiser. He watched. He did not say anything. He would keep not saying anything for the entire duration of what followed, and that silence would follow him for the rest of his career. Officer, Elias said, his voice still measured, still even, still refusing to give Harlan the reaction he was fishing for. I am an elderly man on his way to pick up a prescription. I am not a threat to you. I am not a threat to anyone. You were swinging that thing at people. I was navigating a broken sidewalk. Stop arguing with me. I am explaining myself, Elias said. There is a difference. Harlan stepped forward and grabbed the cane. It happened fast. His hand closed around the shaft just below Elias's grip, and he pulled. Elias's hand tightened. Not from resistance, not from defiance, but from something so deep and automatic it bypassed thought entirely. Take away the cane, and Elias was standing in the middle of a city sidewalk with no way to know where the curb was, where the wall was, where anything was. His hand had been trained by years of necessity to hold on. His hand held on. Let go, Harlan said, his voice dropping low and mean. Let go right now, please, Elias started. Harlan ripped the cane free and then he broke it. He brought it down over his raised knee like he was snapping a piece of kindling for a fire. The sound was a crack, sharp and ugly and final. The mahogany handle, Eleanor's handle, sanded smooth by Eleanor's hands, fitted to the curve of Elias's palm by the woman who had loved him for decades, separated from the shaft and bounced off the concrete sidewalk. Elias went completely still, not frozen with fear, still in a different way. Still, the way a man goes still when something is taken from him that cannot be given back. His hand was open now, empty, and he held it at his side like he did not quite know what to do with it. Up the block, Clarence had stopped arranging his apples. 3 people had their phones out. A woman in a green coat was already talking loudly. What is wrong with you? He is blind. He is blind. but her voice seemed to be coming from very far away. "Turn around," Harlan said. "Hands behind your back." "Oh, what?" Elias said. It was not protest, it was genuine disbelief. "You heard me. Turn around. You are under arrest." "For what?" "Assaulting an officer. Resisting arrest." The words landed like a physical thing. Elias stood there for a moment. And in that moment, his face did something complicated. Something that moved through disbelief and pain and landed somewhere older and harder and sadder, like he had hoped the world had changed enough that he would not be standing here again. It had not. He turned around, he put his hands behind his back. He let the cuffs go on without another word. Because he was Elias James Caldwell, and he had survived things that would have broken men half his age, and he was not going to give Vincent Harlan the satisfaction of seeing him break now. Harlan walked him to the cruiser and pushed him into the back seat, not gently. The door slammed. Elias sat in the darkness, which was the same darkness as always. The darkness he lived in every day, except this darkness smelled like plastic and sweat and old coffee. And somewhere behind him on the sidewalk, in two pieces on the cold concrete, was the last thing Eleanor's hands had ever made for him. The ride to the precinct took minutes. Elias knew because he counted. It was something he had learned to do after losing his sight. Measure the world in time when he could not measure it in distance. Minutes in the back of a cruiser with his hands cuffed behind him. No seatbelt, no cane, no way to brace himself when Harlan took corners too fast. The plastic seat was hard and cold. The cage divider in front of him smelled like someone else's fear. He did not speak. There was nothing to say to these men that they were willing to hear. He thought about Eleanor instead. He thought about her hands working that piece of mahogany on the kitchen table. The sound of the sandpaper going back and forth in long, smooth strokes while he sat across from her and pretended to read. He thought about her measuring his grip with a piece of string, serious as a surgeon. "I'm going to make sure it fits you right," she had said. "You are going to carry it every day. It needs to feel like yours." It had. It always had. He pressed his lips together and looked straight ahead into the dark. The booking area of the precinct was loud, the way police stations are always loud. Phones, voices, the buzz of fluorescent lights that never quite settled into silence. A desk sergeant named Wilson looked up when Harlan brought Elias in, assessed the situation in seconds, and looked back down at his paperwork. Harlan walked Elias to the processing desk like he was delivering a package. "Assaulting an officer," he said to nobody in particular. "Resisting. He has no cane," Whitaker said quietly from somewhere behind Harlan. "He will survive." A younger officer near the far wall glanced over. He looked at Elias, the good jacket, the steady posture, the empty hand that kept opening and closing slightly, without Elias seeming to notice, and then looked away. Harlan leaned against the counter while Elias was processed. He was relaxed now. The tight-wound energy from the street had loosened into something worse, something easy and casual and entertained. "You see the way he was holding on to that thing," Harlan said to Whitaker, loud enough to carry. He held up his own hand and mimicked a trembling grip. Then he let his eyes go vacant and swayed slightly, mocking the unsteady walk of a blind man. Two officers laughed. One of them laughed too hard. Whitaker made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite a protest, and not quite anything at all. Desk Sergeant Wilson looked up. "Harlan, he needs disability paperwork filed." Harlan waved a hand. "Just process him." "Policy says if the subject is visually—" "I said process him, Wilson." Wilson held Harlan's gaze for 1 second. Then he looked back down at his form and kept writing. The paperwork that should have been filed was not filed. The accommodation that should have been made was not made. Elias stood at the processing desk and said nothing. His face gave nothing away. But his right hand, the one that had held Eleanor's cane every day for years, stayed open at his side, empty like it was still waiting. A short while earlier, a young nursing student named Kelly Brown had posted a brief video to her social media account with the caption, "They arrested a blind man and broke his cane." In broad daylight, somebody shared this. Hundreds of thousands of people shared it. One of them was Reverend Clara Whitaker. Reverend Clara Whitaker had been organizing this community for years. She ran the Wednesday food pantry at First Missionary Baptist. She had the mayor's personal cell number and was not afraid to use it. She had buried members of her congregation who died waiting for justice that never came. And she had decided a long time ago that she was going to be the reason that stopped happening on her watch. She watched the video twice. Then she called Jenna Hargrove. Jenna Hargrove, a civil rights attorney, had successfully sued the NYPD before and was widely known in the department's legal office as someone they did not want to see walking through a door. She answered on the second ring, listened, and said, "I will meet you there." Within the hour, Reverend Whitaker was at the front desk of the precinct with community members at her back, and Jenna Hargrove beside her with a briefcase and an expression like a closed fist. A local news van had pulled up outside. The camera was already rolling. The desk sergeant picked up his phone. Captain Harlan Voss came downstairs minutes later. He was silver-haired with the careful face of a man who had spent decades learning exactly how much to reveal and when. He stepped into the lobby and took it all in without appearing to the news camera on the sidewalk, the community members filling the waiting area, the attorney with her briefcase standing at the desk like she owned the floor beneath her feet. His expression did not change, but the decision was already made. Captain Voss pulled Harlan into a side hallway and spoke to him in a low, flat voice. Nobody heard what was said. But when Harlan came back out, the casual ease he had been carrying since the booking desk was gone, replaced by something tighter, smaller. He walked back to the processing area without making eye contact with anyone. The charges against Elias Caldwell were dropped. The official reason entered into the system by a desk sergeant who wrote it without comment was insufficient grounds for arrest. No apology was issued. No explanation was offered to Elias directly. Captain Voss returned to the lobby and delivered a brief, carefully constructed statement to Reverend Whitaker and Jenna Hargrove about a procedural review that would be conducted thoroughly and taken very seriously. He used the word committed 4 times in 6 sentences. Jenna Hargrove wrote nothing down. She did not need to. She had heard versions of this speech before. Different mouth, same words, same meaning, which was, "Please go away." She had no intention of going away. Elias's belongings were returned to him in a plastic tray. His wallet, his pharmacy list still folded in thirds, his money still organized by denomination, and finally 1 evidence bag containing 2 pieces of broken white and red cane, the mahogany handle separated cleanly from the shaft, like something that had been alive and was not anymore. Elias picked up the evidence bag with both hands. He held it carefully, the way you hold something fragile, even though what was inside was already broken and there was nothing left to protect. Reverend Whitaker appeared at his elbow. She did not say anything right away. She just put her hand on his arm and stood there, which was sometimes the only true thing a person could offer. "I have got you," she said quietly. "Let us get you home." Outside, the October air hit cold and clean. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Neighbors, people who had seen the video, people who had simply been walking by and stopped when they saw what was happening. When Elias came through the precinct doors, guided by Reverend Whitaker's arm, someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then the whole sidewalk was clapping, and a woman near the back was crying. And the news camera was recording all of it. Elias stood on the top step and held the evidence bag against his chest. He did not smile. He did not wave. He lifted his face slightly, the way he always did when he was listening hard for something. And he let the sound of those people wash over him for a moment. Just a moment. Then he let Reverend Whitaker guide him down the steps toward the street. Jenna Hargrove stopped at the bottom of the steps and turned to face the camera directly. Her voice was clear and steady and carried across the sidewalk without effort. "What happened to Elias Caldwell this morning was not a mistake," she said. "It was excessive force against a disabled man. It was a civil rights violation, and it will be treated as exactly that. We will be filing a formal civil complaint, and we will not be accepting any settlement that does not acknowledge the full truth of what occurred here today." The camera stayed on her. She meant every word. Reverend Whitaker brought Elias home and sat him in his armchair. Elias placed the evidence bag on the coffee table in front of him. Then he reached inside carefully and removed the 2 pieces of the cane. He set them down side by side, the mahogany handle on the left, the shaft on the right, arranged with the kind of care that had nothing to do with hoping they could be fixed. He just needed them to be together. He sat with his hands on his knees and his face toward the window, and the afternoon light came through the glass and fell across him and across the broken pieces on the table. And the apartment was very quiet. That evening, Captain Harlan Voss sat alone in his office on the 2nd floor of the precinct and opened his laptop. He navigated to the Secure Watch Systems portal, the city's contracted cloud security server that stored the precinct's internal camera footage. He located the booking area recording from that morning. His user account accessed the file. By moments later, it had been flagged as corrupted. By morning, both neighborhood witnesses who had given initial statements to the responding officers had been contacted. Both recanted, citing misremembering. City Attorney Paula Kendrick called Jenna Hargrove's office. Her voice was smooth and practiced and warm in the way that expensive things sometimes are. "We would like to discuss a resolution," she said. "The city is prepared to offer Mr. Caldwell a settlement along with a confidentiality agreement to bring this matter to a close." Jenna Hargrove wrote the number down on a yellow legal pad. She drew a circle around it. "I will convey it to my client," she said. She hung up and looked at the number for a long moment. Then she drew a line through it. The safe house was a rented townhouse in Baltimore with blackout curtains and bad plumbing and a folding table in the living room covered in surveillance photographs, call logs, and cold takeout containers. Marcus Caldwell had been sitting at that table for hours straight. He was good at this, patient in a way that most people were not built for. The kind of patient that came not from calm, but from discipline. From training himself over years to hold still when everything in him wanted to move. His coffee had gone cold. He had not noticed. His phone buzzed on the table beside a stack of printed transcripts. He glanced at the screen. Not his father's number. His father called every morning without fail. This was Reverend Whitaker. He picked up. Reverend Whitaker told him everything. She told him about the video, the arrest, the broken cane, the precinct, the dropped charges, the crowd outside. She told him about the settlement offer and the confidentiality agreement. She told him about the 2 witnesses who had recanted overnight and the security footage that had been quietly flagged as corrupted by morning. Then she said, "Marcus." They broke Eleanor's cane. The room kept going around him. His colleagues moved between the table and the kitchen. Someone's radio crackled. Someone laughed at something on the other side of the room. Marcus set the phone face down on the table. He sat there for seconds, just seconds, which was all he allowed himself. Then he picked the phone back up. "I will call you back, Reverend." He stood and walked to where his supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Dexter Sanford, was standing by the window reviewing a surveillance log. "I need personal leave," Marcus said. "Effective now." Sanford looked up. He was a practical man who did not waste time on unnecessary reactions. "We are deep into a build that has taken months. Caldwell, I need you at that table." "My father was arrested this morning," Marcus said. "He is elderly. He has been blind for years, An officer broke his mobility cane and handcuffed him on a public sidewalk. Sanford studied him. Is he hurt? Not physically. Then I need you at that table. The room had gone quiet in the way rooms do when people are pretending not to listen. Marcus said, they broke Eleanor's cane. Although nobody in that room had known Eleanor Caldwell, but they had all worked alongside Marcus long enough to know what those words meant, the way he said them, the particular stillness that came over his face when he did. Sanford looked at him for a long moment. 2 weeks, Sanford said. Do not embarrass the Bureau. Marcus drove to New York that night, hours on the interstate with the radio off and the windows cracked and his mind working the way it always worked, methodically, carefully building the problem from the ground up. He was an FBI agent. He had no jurisdiction over local police misconduct. If he walked into this as Marcus Caldwell's son, he was just another angry family member with a grievance and no leverage. If he used his badge carelessly, he handed the city's attorneys exactly what they needed. A federal agent interfering in a civil matter for personal reasons, tainting every complaint, every witness, every piece of evidence. He could not be reckless. His father had raised him to understand that the difference between justice and revenge was precision. But there was something else Reverend Whitaker had mentioned almost as an aside near the end of the call. She had said it the way people say things they think are small when they are actually everything. Harlan had prior complaints, all from black residents in his patrol area. All filed, all buried, all settled under confidentiality agreements. Marcus drove and thought about that. Prior complaints meant a pattern. A pattern documented and provable was the difference between one bad morning and a systemic civil rights violation. That was the road to federal jurisdiction. That was the thread he needed to find. He pulled up outside his father's building on 118th Street at night. The neighborhood was quiet. A few windows lit up, the bodega on the corner still open, someone's music drifting down from a high floor somewhere. Marcus sat in the car for a moment. He pressed his hands flat on the steering wheel and breathed. Then he went upstairs. His father's apartment door was unlocked, the way it always was when Elias was expecting him. Marcus pushed it open and stepped inside, one lamp on in the corner. The smell of the apartment, coffee and old books, and something else he had never been able to name, that was simply the smell of home. Elias was in his armchair, awake. His hands rested on his knees, and on the coffee table in front of him in 2 pieces lay what was left of Eleanor's cane. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Elias said, "You did not have to come all this way." "Yes, I did," Marcus said. He sat down across from his father, pulled the yellow legal pad from his bag, and uncapped his pen. He was not leaving until this was done. They sat across from each other in the quiet apartment, father and son. The broken cane between them on the coffee table like evidence of something that had not been resolved yet. Marcus had his legal pad open. His pen was uncapped, but he was not writing anything yet. He was watching his father. Elias's hands were folded on his knees. His face was turned slightly toward the window, the way it always was, not because there was anything to see, but because that was where the sounds came in. The neighborhood settling into night, a distant siren, someone's television through a thin wall. "You are trying to figure out how to fix it," Elias said. "I am without breaking anything else in the process." Marcus looked at him. "That is exactly right." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he reached forward and touched the broken cane with one hand. Just rested his fingers on it lightly. The way you touch something you are saying goodbye to. "The law is a tool, Marcus," he said. "You know how a tool can be used right and how it can be used wrong." He lifted his hand from the cane and settled back into the chair. "Use it right." Marcus wrote that down word for word on the first line of the legal pad. He looked at it for a second. Then he drew a line under it and started working. The next morning, Marcus called Adrienne Lang from the sidewalk outside his father's building. He kept his voice low and his back to the street. Adrienne Lang had spent years at the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and she had built more systemic police misconduct cases than anyone in the department's recent history. She was methodical, precise, and allergic to shortcuts. She was also the only person Marcus trusted completely to tell him the truth when the truth was inconvenient. "I need to talk through a situation," he said. "I figured," she said. "I saw the video." He told her everything: the arrest, the cover-up already taking shape, the witnesses who had recanted, the footage flagged as corrupted within hours. Then he told her about the prior complaints against Harlan. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "Marcus, one incident, regardless of how egregious, rarely opens a federal civil rights investigation against an individual officer. You know that." "I know. What we need is a pattern, documented, provable. Those buried complaints are your foundation. But we need to show more than that they existed. We need to show that Voss knew about them and actively worked to make them disappear. Deliberate institutional suppression. That is the federal hook." "That is what I thought." "And Marcus," she said, "you cannot work this with your badge. If the city's attorneys find out an FBI agent is personally running down witnesses in a case involving his own father, they will use that to discredit everything, every statement, every complainant, every piece of evidence you touch." "I know," he said again. "I am working this as a private citizen." A pause. "That is a hard line to walk." "My father has been walking hard lines his whole life," Marcus said. "I think I can manage." He heard her exhale. "Find those complainants. Get their stories documented through Jenna Hargrove's office, not through you. Give me something I can take upstairs that does not have your fingerprints on it." "Understood. Thank you, Adrienne." "Do not thank me yet," she said. "And Marcus, be careful. Voss did not get to captain by being careless. He is already ahead of where you think he is." Marcus went back upstairs. His father had made coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table with the radio on low. A jazz station, the kind Eleanor had always favored. Marcus poured himself a cup and stood at the counter looking at his legal pad. 3 names. That was where this started. The first was Thomas Lang, a retired postal worker from the Bronx who had filed a complaint against Harlan and settled. The second was Cassandra Torres, a woman from Washington Heights who had been stopped outside her church and had withdrawn her complaint after filing it. The third had moved out of state, current location unknown. He started with Thomas. That afternoon, Jenna Hargrove formally rejected Paula Kendrick's settlement offer on Elias's behalf. She sent the rejection in writing by certified mail with a single line beneath the refusal that read, "My client intends to pursue full accountability through every available legal channel." Kendrick received the letter. By moments later, she was already making calls. Marcus did not know that yet, but he would. Thomas Lang lived on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in the Bronx, on a street where half the storefronts had their gates pulled down, even in the middle of the day. Marcus found the building without trouble and climbed the stairs, slowly, thinking about what he was walking into. He was not a federal agent today. He was just a man knocking on a door. He knocked. It took a moment. Then the sound of careful footsteps, the kind that approach a door without committing to opening it. A pause. Then the chain sliding, the deadbolt turning, and the door opening enough for one eye and half a face. Thomas Lang was elderly. He had the broad shoulders of a man who had spent decades hauling mail sacks and the careful, watchful eyes of someone who had learned the hard way that unexpected visitors rarely meant good news. "Mr. Lang," Marcus said, "my name is Marcus Caldwell. My father is Elias Caldwell. I think you may have seen the video." The eyes studied him. Then the door opened the rest of the way. The apartment was tidy in the particular way of a man living alone who takes pride in order. A recliner positioned in front of the television, plants in the window recently watered, a photograph on the wall of a younger Thomas in his postal uniform, grinning wide, standing next to a woman who shared his eyes. Thomas sat in the recliner and folded his hands and looked at Marcus the way a man looks at someone he wants to trust but has learned not to. "I know why you are here," he said. "Then you know what I am going to ask." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Harlan stopped me outside the Associated on Morris Avenue," he said finally. "Middle of the day, I had 2 grocery bags in my hands." He looked at his hands now as if he could still feel the bags. He said I matched a description. He would not tell me what description. He told me to put the bags down. And when I asked why, he put his hand on my chest and pushed me into the wall. The room was very quiet. "I filed the complaint the same day," Thomas continued. "Wrote down everything while it was still fresh. Dates, times, badge number, everything." He paused. "Days later, somebody from the city attorney's office called my daughter's job. Her supervisor got a call asking questions, professional questions, the kind designed to make an employer nervous." Marcus did not move. "And then my daughter called me crying, asking me what was going on, asking if she was going to lose her job." Thomas's voice did not break, but it got very flat. "I settled and signed their paper, and I have not spoken about it since." He looked at Marcus directly. "I cannot go through that again. I am sorry. I am sorry about your father. I watched that video and I felt sick to my stomach because I know exactly what that man was feeling on that sidewalk. I know it in my bones." His jaw tightened. "But I cannot put my daughter back in that position. I will not." Marcus nodded slowly. He did not push. He thanked Thomas Lang, stood, and left. He was standing outside on the sidewalk, hands in his jacket pockets, when his phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline read, "Elias Caldwell, arrested in viral cane video, has prior arrest record." Marcus read the article in seconds. It referenced an old arrest described in deliberate, vague language that implied violence and instability. It did not mention that the charges had been dismissed the same week. It did not mention that Elias had intervened to protect a student from an attacker outside his own school. It did not mention the commendation the school board had issued him the following year. It was a clean hit. Surgical, designed to do maximum damage with minimum facts. Kendrick's office had to be. He stood on that Bronx sidewalk and read the comment section for seconds, enough to see the damage already spreading, and then put his phone away because reading further would not help anything. He pulled out his legal pad instead. Beneath Thomas Lang's name, he wrote 2 words and underlined them both. Systemic, deliberate. This was not one officer with a bad temper. This was a machine built piece by piece over years, designed to hurt people and then hurt them again when they tried to say something about it. He uncapped his pen and wrote the second name on the list, Cassandra Torres. Washington Heights was minutes from the Bronx by subway, and Marcus spent the ride with his legal pad open on his knee, reviewing his notes from Thomas Lang's apartment. He read them twice. Then he closed the pad and watched the city move past the windows in the dark tunnel and thought about what a machine looks like when you are standing inside it. It looks like nothing. That is the point. It looks like paperwork and phone calls and legal language and unfortunate coincidences. It looks like a daughter's employer getting a routine inquiry. It looks like a witness who simply changed her mind. It only looks like a machine when you step back far enough to see all the pieces moving together. Marcus was stepping back. Reverend Whitaker had called ahead. When Marcus knocked on the door of Cassandra Torres's apartment, it opened within seconds. No chain, no hesitation. Cassandra Torres was small and sharp-eyed, with the kind of stillness about her that suggested she had been holding something in for a long time and was very tired of holding it. "Come in," she said. "I have been waiting for someone to come." The apartment smelled like coffee and candle wax. A large wooden cross hung above the kitchen doorway. On the table, before Marcus had even sat down, there was already a manila folder, thick, organized. He looked at it, then at her. "Months," she said, sitting across from him and folding her hands on top of the folder. "I have been waiting for someone to sit in that chair." She told it straight, without drama, in the manner of a woman who had rehearsed the telling so many times it had worn smooth. Harlan had stopped her on an evening, half a block from First Missionary Baptist, where she sang in the choir. She had been carrying her sheet music. She was running late and walking quickly, and Harlan had stepped out of his cruiser and told her to slow down. She slowed down. She asked politely what the problem was. "Problem is, you are acting suspicious," Harlan had told her. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" she explained. Choir rehearsal half a block. She even pointed at the church. Harlan made her stand on that sidewalk for minutes. He ran her ID. He asked her the same questions multiple times in slightly different orders, the way people do when they are hoping to catch a contradiction. He went through her choir bag. He held up her sheet music and looked at it like it might be something else entirely. "He was not looking for anything," Cassandra said. "He was just making sure I knew I could be stopped, that I could be made to stand there, that there was nothing I could do about it." When she finally reached the church, she was shaking so badly that Reverend Whitaker had sat with her before she could sing a note. She filed the complaint the next morning. Weeks later, a man called her cell phone. He introduced himself as an immigration attorney. He told her in a sympathetic and professional voice that he had become aware of her situation through community channels and wanted to offer guidance. He told her that pursuing civil action against the police department could complicate her pending citizenship application, flag her file, create delays, attract scrutiny she did not want. She thanked him and withdrew the complaint that same afternoon. Marcus looked up from his notepad. "Did he give you his name?" Cassandra opened the folder. "He gave me his card," she said. "I kept everything." She slid a business card across the table. Marcus picked it up. The name on it meant nothing to him yet. But that evening, sitting in his father's kitchen with his laptop open, it would mean everything. The attorney had no established immigration practice. His firm's website had been registered before Cassandra's complaint was filed. And buried in the public records of the city's outside legal counsel contracts was a retainer agreement. The same firm hired before Cassandra ever picked up a phone to file her complaint. They had been ready, waiting, a tool already built, sitting in a drawer, ready to be used on whoever needed silencing next. Marcus set the business card down on the table carefully. The way you set down something you do not want to damage. "Ms. Torres," he said, "can I ask, why did you keep all of this?" Cassandra looked at him with those sharp, tired eyes. "Because I knew," she said simply. "I knew somebody would come eventually." She glanced at the folder. "I just needed to make sure that when they did, I had everything they needed to finish it." Marcus pulled out his phone and called Jenna Hargrove. Jenna Hargrove filed the federal civil rights complaint. It was pages long. It named Vincent Harlan as the primary subject, cited his known prior complaints as evidence of a documented pattern of racially motivated misconduct, and identified the destruction of the booking area security footage as deliberate obstruction. It named Captain Harlan Voss as a facilitating party. It requested that the DOJ's Civil Rights Division open a formal investigation under federal statute. Jenna had been building toward a filing like this for years. Every word in those pages was chosen the way a surgeon chooses an instrument, precisely, purposefully, with full knowledge of what it was going to cut. She sent it. By later that day, Adrienne Lang called her back. A preliminary inquiry was open. The news broke. By the next morning, it had moved from local outlets to national ones. And by afternoon, a prominent civil rights organization had announced a rally outside the precinct. Marcus told his father about the inquiry that evening. Elias was in his armchair, hands on his knees, face toward the window. "Things are moving," Marcus said. Elias was quiet for a moment. His thumb moved slowly across the arm of the chair. "How fast?" "Fast enough?" Elias nodded once. His hand moved to the coffee table where the two pieces of Eleanor's cane still lay side by side. He rested his fingers on the mahogany handle. "Do not stop moving, son," he said. Marcus did not. The crowd was larger than anyone had officially expected. People spreading out across the sidewalk and into the street until a pair of traffic officers had to redirect cars around the block. Hand-painted signs, a sound system someone had hauled in on a dolly, camera crews from local stations and one national affiliate. A photographer captured an image that would run in newspapers. A large framed photograph of Elias held up at the front of the crowd, showing him on the precinct steps the day of his release, holding the evidence bag against his chest, his face lifted slightly as though listening for something just beyond what the rest of them could hear. Whoever had printed it had done so large enough that his expression was unmistakable. Dignity, unbroken and unbowed. That photograph became the face of everything that followed. Reverend Whitaker took the makeshift podium, a milk crate with a microphone stand, and spoke without notes. She named names. She cited details. She told Thomas Lang's story without using his name, and she told Cassandra's story without using hers. And she told Elias's story, using every detail because Elias had given his permission for every detail to be used. "They thought breaking his cane would break him," she said, her voice carrying clean and clear over the crowd. "They do not know Elias Caldwell," the crowd answered her. Jenna Hargrove followed. She was brief and precise in the way that landing a punch is brief and precise. She confirmed the federal inquiry. She stated that the city's settlement offer had been rejected. She said the word accountability and meant it differently each time. Meanwhile, Captain Harlan Voss sat in a chair before the precinct's civilian oversight board and performed the role he had spent decades perfecting. He was cooperative. He was concerned. He expressed deep commitment to community trust and departmental transparency. He used the word thorough and looked each board member in the eye when he said it. He answered every question fully and revealed nothing. The board thanked him for his time. Voss drove back to the precinct, went up to his office, and closed the door. He sat at his desk for minutes, very still, looking at nothing in particular. Then he opened his laptop and began drafting a memo to his administrative staff about updated internal record-keeping procedures. He was ahead. He had always been ahead. He just did not know that Marcus Caldwell was not playing the same game he was. That evening, the mayor's office issued a public statement calling for a full departmental review and expressing commitment to ensuring all residents of New York City were treated with dignity and respect. Marcus read it on his phone and set the phone face down on the table. Some words meant something. Some words were weather. A lot of sound and motion that changed nothing on the ground. He picked his legal pad back up and kept working. Days after the rally, a judge ruled the bystander video inadmissible. The ruling came down, buried in procedural language about the filming of on-duty city employees without departmental consent. Kendrick's legal team had been working that angle for weeks, hunting for the right judge, the right argument, the right moment to file. They found all three. The ruling did not kill the civil case outright, but it ripped the heart out of it. The video, the seconds that had been seen by over 1 million people, the thing that had started all of this, could not be used in a courtroom. The most powerful piece of evidence Elias Caldwell had was now off the table. Jenna Hargrove called Marcus and gave it to him straight, the way she always did. No softening, no false comfort, just the facts, clean and hard. Marcus thanked her and hung up. He sat at his father's kitchen table and wrote the ruling down on his legal pad, word for word, the way his father had taught him to write down things that were difficult. If you write it down, Elias used to say, it cannot sneak up on you twice. He stared at what he had written. Then he turned to the next page and kept working. The second blow came that afternoon. Thomas Lang called. Marcus knew from the first syllable the particular heaviness of it, the way a man sounds when he has made a decision that costs him something real. "I cannot do it," Thomas said. "I am sorry, Marcus. I am so sorry." "What happened?" A long pause. "They called my son's job this time." His voice was very quiet. "Not my daughter, my son, different employer, different city, different state. They found him anyway." Another pause. "He called me this morning asking if he was going to be fired. He has kids, Marcus. He just bought a house." Marcus closed his eyes. "Thomas, I am sorry," Thomas said again. "I am so sorry about your father. I mean that with everything I have. But I cannot be the reason my son loses everything he has built." His voice cracked just slightly at the edges. "I hope you understand." "I understand," Marcus said. And he did. That was the worst part. He understood completely. The line went quiet. Thomas Lang hung up. Marcus set the phone on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. Then he picked up his pen. The third blow fell that evening. Adrienne Lang called. Marcus knew from the way she said his name. Not her official voice, not her DOJ voice, but her personal one. The one she used when she was about to tell him something she hated having to say. "The preliminary inquiry has been administratively paused," she said. "That is the official language." Marcus was quiet. "It came from above me," she continued. "Someone in the city's congressional delegation made a call. I do not know exactly who picked up. I do not have that information. What I know is that the inquiry is finished, and I cannot reopen it without authorization. I am not going to receive that authorization, Marcus. I am furious. I want you to know that I am absolutely furious and I am powerless." "I know," he said. "Thank you for calling me yourself." "Be careful," she said. "Please." She hung up. Marcus sat with the phone in his hand and thought about the machine, the way it worked, the way it reached into every room, every office, every jurisdiction, and made itself felt without ever showing its face. A congressional phone call, a son's employer in another state, a sympathetic judge on a procedural technicality. None of it visible, all of it devastating. There was one more thing. Harlan's police union attorney had filed a formal harassment complaint against an unknown civilian interfering with civil witnesses. The description in the filing was detailed enough that Marcus's own supervisor at the New York FBI field office had been quietly notified. His supervisor called. The conversation was short and not kind. Marcus had hours to demonstrate that his personal conduct had not compromised the Bureau's integrity. He had no federal hook, no jurisdiction, no video, no witnesses, no inquiry. He had a father and a broken cane and a yellow legal pad. He ended up in Marcus Garvey Park, sitting on a bench as the sun went down behind the buildings and the sky turned the color of old brick. He sat there for a long time without moving. Then he called his father. Elias picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, are you there?" "I am here, Dad." A pause, not empty, full of something. The kind of quiet that two people share when words are not quite big enough yet. "Good," Elias said. "Then we are not done yet." Marcus looked up at the darkening sky. "No," he said, "we are not." Marcus got back to the apartment. His father was asleep in the armchair, chin dipped slightly toward his chest, hands folded in his lap the way they always were when Elias slept sitting up. The lamp in the corner was on. The broken cane pieces were still on the coffee table. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at his father in the lamplight, at the good jacket still on his shoulders, at the lines in his face that had come with the years, at the stillness of a man who had earned his rest and kept being denied it. He went to the kitchen, he made coffee, he sat down at the table with the yellow legal pad and a pen, and he started over from the very beginning. Not as an agent, not as a son, as a man who had spent years learning to find the thing that everyone else had walked past without seeing, the thread that looked like nothing until you pulled it. And then the whole thing came apart. He wrote down everything he knew in the order that he knew it. The arrest, the charges dropped, the cover-up, the witnesses recanted, the footage flagged as corrupted, the settlement offer, the smear article, Thomas Lang, Cassandra Torres, the fraudulent immigration attorney, the congressional phone call, the union harassment complaint. He read it all back slowly. Then he stopped. He went back to one line, footage flagged as corrupted. He stared at it. He knew secure watch systems. Not personally, professionally. The FBI used a different vendor for their own secure storage, but Secure Watch had come up in a federal contracting audit years ago that Marcus had been peripherally involved in. He knew how their system worked. He knew its architecture. Cloud-based government contract storage systems did not corrupt the way Voss had described. True corruption on a cloud server, the kind that made footage unrecoverable, left a specific signature. It came from hardware failure or data transfer errors, and it degraded footage gradually, frame by frame. It looked a particular way. More importantly, it happened to the footage itself. It did not happen to the access logs. The logs were stored separately on redundant servers precisely because the city's contract with Secure Watch required an unbroken chain of custody for all recorded material. Marcus sat forward. If someone had accessed that footage and deleted it deliberately, that deletion would be recorded in the access log. A user account, a timestamp, a specific terminal. Cloud deletion, the kind that looks like corruption if nobody checks too carefully, was not true deletion, not under a system like Secure Watch. Under the city's contract, deleted footage was held in a recoverable state on Secure Watch's backup servers before permanent removal. He looked at the calendar on his phone. Days since the arrest. Days left in the recovery window. He sat very still for a moment. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. From the living room he could hear his father breathing in slow and even measures. Destroying records on a municipal government contract system was not a local police matter. Municipal contracts with federal compliance requirements fell under federal record statutes. Deliberately deleting secured government footage was not evidence tampering in a civil case. It was a federal crime. Specifically, it was a violation of destruction of records in a federal investigation. Marcus could not open a civil rights investigation. He had no jurisdiction over local police misconduct. He had been told that in different ways by different people over the past days, but he absolutely could report a federal records destruction violation to the FBI Cyber Division. That was not personal. That was not overreach. That was a citizen, any citizen, FBI agent or not, reporting a federal crime through the correct channel. He looked at the clock on the microwave. The Cyber Division had a reporting line for federal records violations. It was designed for corporate whistleblowers and government contractors. Nobody had ever used it the way Marcus was about to use it. He picked up his phone. He sat with it in his hand for a moment, thinking about what his father had said. The law is a tool. You know how it can be used right and how it can be used wrong. Voss had used it wrong for years. He had used it like a weapon. Blunt, indiscriminate, designed to hurt and silence and protect the people who deserved no protection. Marcus dialed. The line rang. Federal records violation reporting. a voice said. "Go ahead." Marcus Caldwell took a breath. "I need to report a federal records destruction violation," he said. "I have reason to believe a government contract storage system has been deliberately accessed and manipulated to destroy evidence. I have the vendor name, the contract number, and the access window. And I need you to move fast because there are days left before the backup expires." He began to talk, and this time nobody stopped him. The FBI Cyber Division did not move the way civil rights inquiries moved. It did not wait for political winds to shift. It did not pause for congressional phone calls. It did not hold preliminary meetings about whether to hold preliminary meetings. It moved the way federal agencies move when the violation is clean, the statute is clear, and the evidence window is closing. Within hours of Marcus's call, investigators had subpoenaed secure watch systems for the complete access logs covering every interaction with the precinct's booking area footage from the date of Elias's arrest forward. Secure Watch's legal team complied. Marcus was at his father's kitchen table when his contact at the Cyber Division called him with the preliminary findings. He had been awake since before sunrise, working the legal pad, running calculations on the recovery window in the margins. "The logs are clean," his contact said. "No corruption signature, no hardware failure, no data transfer error." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Accessed and deleted deliberately. Specific user account registered to the precinct administrative system. The deletion was performed from a terminal inside the precinct building." A pause. "The account belongs to a Captain Harlan Voss." The kitchen was very quiet. "And the footage?" Marcus asked. "Secure Watch runs a backup protocol on all government contract storage. It is written into their city agreement. The footage was not permanently destroyed." Another pause, this one with something different in it. "We recovered it this morning." Marcus set his pen down on the legal pad. He pressed his hand flat on the table and breathed. "How bad is it?" he asked. "You will want to sit down when you watch it," his contact said. "You are already sitting down, right?" "I am." "Stay sitting." The recovered footage ran for minutes. Marcus watched it alone on his laptop at the kitchen table with the volume low so it would not wake his father. He watched it once straight through without stopping. Then he closed the laptop and sat with his hands folded and stared at the wall for a long time. The footage showed Vincent Harlan inside the booking area after Elias had been processed. He was relaxed, comfortable. He stood near the far wall with other officers and Whitaker, and he was performing. There was no other word for it. He held up both hands and let his eyes go vacant and stumbled slightly, mocking the walk of a blind man. His mouth was moving. The audio was clear. What came out of it was not fit for any public record, but it was on the record now, preserved in federal evidence, and it would not be going anywhere. The other officers were laughing. Whitaker made a sound that was trying to be a laugh and could not quite get there. His eyes moved to the door, and then, at the mark, Captain Harlan Voss walked through the booking area. He slowed. He looked at Harlan. He looked at what Harlan was doing. He stood there for seconds, which Marcus counted. Then he kept walking. He went through the far door without a word, without a gesture, without a single indication that what he had just witnessed was anything other than acceptable. Seconds. Decades of authority, and he kept walking. Marcus opened the laptop again and watched those seconds more times. While the Cyber Division was working, Jenna Hargrove's emergency motion regarding the fraudulent immigration attorney was heard by a different judge. One Paula Kendrick had not anticipated. The motion was granted. The attorney's communications were subpoenaed. What came back was comprehensive and damning. A paper trail connecting him directly to the city's outside legal counsel firm, a retainer that predated Cassandra's complaint, and a series of text messages that used careful coded language that nonetheless described exactly what it was: a coordinated effort to discourage a witness from pursuing a civil rights complaint against a city employee. It was witness tampering, it was documented, and it was now in Jenna Hargrove's hands. When Cassandra Torres received the call from Jenna Hargrove explaining that her testimony was now legally protected and that the man who had silenced her was facing his own legal exposure, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When do you need me?" "As soon as you can get here," Jenna said. Cassandra was at Jenna Hargrove's office within the hour. She sat down across the desk and placed her manila folder on top. Every text, every voicemail, every document organized in chronological order and paper-clipped by category. She was not frightened anymore. She was something else entirely. Something that had been building for months in a quiet apartment in Washington Heights, waiting for exactly this moment. Jenna Hargrove's phone rang. It was Marcus. She listened. Then she said, "Cassandra is in. Thomas will follow when he hears about Voss." "Marcus, the footage is the case. It is over for them." She hung up and looked at Cassandra across the desk. "Let us get to work," she said. Thomas Lang called. Marcus was already awake, already at the kitchen table, already on his second cup of coffee. He had barely slept, not from anxiety, from momentum. The kind of momentum that builds in the final stretch of something long and hard when the finish line is close enough to feel, but still far enough to lose. He picked up on the first ring. "I heard," Thomas said. There was something different in his voice. The heaviness was still there that never fully left a man. But underneath it was something else, something that had straightened up. "Somebody from the community called me last night, said there were federal charges coming for Voss." "That is right," Marcus said, a long breath on the other end of the line. "And Harlan, full FBI civil rights investigation, federal charges under deprivation of rights under color of law." Marcus paused. "That carries prison time, Thomas, real prison time." The line was quiet for a moment. "Tell me where to sign," Thomas Lang said. Marcus felt something release in his chest, quiet and clean, like a knot finally worked loose. "I will have Jenna Hargrove's office contact you." "I will be here," Thomas said. "I am not going anywhere." He hung up. Marcus set the phone down and looked at the window. The morning was gray and cold outside, the kind of October morning that meant business. He wrote Thomas Lang's name on the legal pad and drew a clean line under it. The federal records destruction charges against Captain Harlan Voss were filed formally. The paperwork named him specifically, his user account, his terminal, his timestamp, his deliberate access and deletion of secured government contract footage. There was no ambiguity in the language. There was no room for the careful, polished performance he had spent decades perfecting in boardrooms and oversight hearings. The federal charging document did not care about his silver hair or his measured voice or his practiced expressions of institutional concern. It only cared about the time, and what he had done was on the record. Voss was placed on unpaid administrative leave, pending prosecution. Reverend Clara Whitaker received a quiet phone call from Marcus. Just the time, just the location, just the words. "They are walking him out." She made calls after that. By moments later, news cameras and a local radio reporter were positioned on the sidewalk outside the precinct. Captain Harlan Voss walked out of the building he had commanded for years, flanked by 2 federal investigators. He was not in handcuffs. The arrangement would come later, but the investigators were close on either side of him, and the space between them was small enough that it made the point clearly. He did not look at the cameras. He looked straight ahead at nothing, that careful, revealing nothing, and walked to the waiting vehicle with the particular stiffness of a man who knows exactly how this moment is going to look in print and cannot do a single thing about it. Oh, the cameras rolled. The radio reporter called it in live. Reverend Whitaker stood on the sidewalk with her arms folded and watched him go. She did not cheer. She did not speak. She just watched with the steady eyes of a woman who had buried members of her congregation while waiting for this kind of mourning. Vincent Harlan was suspended without pay. His union attorney, a man who had successfully defended Harlan against prior complaints, who had filed harassment complaints and drafted settlement agreements and made problems disappear with remarkable efficiency, received a copy of the recovered booking footage. He watched it. He called Harlan and told him he was withdrawing from the case, effective immediately, citing an irreconcilable conflict of interest. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Harlan called back. The attorney did not pick up. Officer Ryan Whitaker sat in an interview room at the Federal Building on Broadway that afternoon and told investigators everything. He told it in the manner of a man who had been waiting for someone to ask, someone with actual authority to do something with the answer. He confirmed the pattern, the culture, the things that happened inside the precinct that everyone saw and nobody said, because saying it meant becoming the next problem that needed to be managed. His cooperation was noted. His testimony was sworn. Marcus sat in his father's apartment that evening and watched the news footage of Voss being walked out, small on his phone screen, silent with the volume off, but clear. He watched it once. Then he sent his father a text message. "It is moving, Dad." Elias's reply came seconds later, which meant he had had Reverend Whitaker help him set up the voice-to-text again. "I know, son. I can feel it." Paula Kendrick resigned. The resignation letter was paragraphs long and cited personal reasons in the careful, non-committal language of a woman who had spent years constructing exits before she ever walked into a room. It was submitted to the mayor's office and leaked to news outlets. Not by Kendrick, but by someone in the mayor's office who understood that a quiet resignation was better managed as a public narrative than as a discovered secret. The story ran under headlines about her legacy of public service, her years of dedication, her commitment to the city. Jenna Hargrove read the headline on her phone, set it face down on her desk, and went back to drafting the bar complaint she had been building. The resignation did not change the complaint. The complaint did not care about the resignation. It laid out in pages of documented evidence how Paula Kendrick had known about the fraudulent immigration attorney's contact with Cassandra Torres, how her office had coordinated the outreach to Thomas Lang's family members as a pressure strategy, and how she had directed the city's legal response in a manner designed to obstruct legitimate civil rights complaints rather than address them. Jenna filed it. The city's new lead counsel, a careful man named Gerard William, who had been handed a burning building and told to put it out with his bare hands, called Jenna Hargrove. He did not begin with pleasantries. "We would like to discuss resolution," he said. "I am listening," Jenna said. "The city is prepared to offer a substantial settlement. We believe—" "How substantial?" A pause. "A number." Jenna wrote the number down. "No." Another pause, longer this time. "Ms. Hargrove." "Mr. William," Jenna said evenly. "You have recovered booking footage showing your officer mocking a blind man inside a police precinct while his commanding officer watched and walked away. You have documented evidence of a coordinated witness intimidation campaign conducted through your own outside counsel. You have a federal records destruction charge against a sitting captain, and you have the full attention of national media." She let that sit for a moment. "You do not want this to go to trial." The negotiation took days. Marcus sat with his father, both of them at the kitchen table, and walked him through the numbers that were being discussed. Elias listened without interrupting, his hands folded, his face toward the window. When Marcus finished, Elias said, "What do they want in return?" "A confidentiality clause," Marcus said. "Standard language. You agree not to speak publicly about the terms." The apartment was quiet for a long moment. Elias unfolded his hands and placed them flat on the table. "No," he said. This happened. It happened to me, and it happened to Thomas Lang, and it happened to Cassandra Torres, and it happened to people whose names we never found." He paused. "Let it be on the record. All of it." Marcus looked at his father for a moment. "I will call Jenna." He said the final agreement was signed. A substantial settlement, no confidentiality provisions, public record filed with the court, accessible to anyone who wanted to find it. Jenna Hargrove held a press conference on the courthouse steps that afternoon. She read the settlement figure into the microphone in a clear, steady voice and watched the reporters write it down. She confirmed that the city had agreed to a full independent review of the precinct's complaint handling procedures going back years. She confirmed that Officer Vincent Harlan remained under federal criminal investigation and had not been reinstated. She confirmed that Captain Harlan Voss's arraignment was scheduled. The original viral video, its courtroom admissibility no longer relevant, was reshared across every platform alongside the recovered booking footage which the Cyber Division had cleared for public release as part of the federal record. Minutes of Vincent Harlan inside a police precinct performing his cruelty for an audience that laughed, while a man who had done nothing wrong sat somewhere in that building holding the two pieces of what his wife had made for him. The internet watched it in silence. Then it did not stay silent. That evening, Marcus made dinner. Nothing elaborate. Rice, chicken, the green beans his father liked. Elias sat at the kitchen table and listened to the sounds of the apartment with the comfortable attention of a man who had learned to read the world through his ears. When the food was on the table, he reached for his fork and said, "What happens to Harlan now?" "Federal prosecution," Marcus said. "Prison time is possible." Elias nodded once, deliberate. "Good," he said. He reached for the salt. His hand moved across the table without hesitation. Easy, certain, knowing exactly where everything was. Some things, Marcus thought, watching his father's hand, could not be taken, no matter how hard someone tried. Marcus found the craftsman through a specialty adaptive equipment supplier in Brooklyn, a retired woodworker named Earl, who had spent years making custom mobility aids and had never once rushed a job. Marcus had brought him the broken pieces weeks ago. Both of them, the shaft and the handle, still in the evidence bag. Earl had held the mahogany handle for a long time without speaking, turning it slowly, reading it with his hands the way Elias read the world. Then he had looked up and said, "I cannot make it the same, but I can make it right." Marcus had said, "That is all I am asking." On a morning, weeks after the federal charges were filed, Marcus arrived at his father's apartment with the new cane wrapped in brown paper and tied with a piece of twine. He set it on the coffee table, the same coffee table where the broken pieces had lived for over a month. The broken pieces were gone now. Marcus had moved them to a shoebox in the closet carefully the night before. He was not ready to throw them away. He did not think he ever would be. Elias heard the paper on the table. His head tilted slightly. "What is that?" "Open it," Marcus said. Elias leaned forward and found the package with his hands. He worked the twine loose slowly, pulled back the paper, and his fingers found the cane. He was quiet for a long moment, hands moving along the shaft up to the handle. The mahogany was new, lighter in color, not yet worn to the deep warmth of Eleanor's, not yet shaped by years of a particular grip. But the fit was right. Earl had measured from the broken handle. He had matched the weight, the balance, the exact diameter where Elias's thumb met his fingers. Elias held it and did not speak. "It is not hers," Marcus said. "I know that." Elias ran his thumb along the handle once, twice. Then he settled back in the chair with the cane resting across his knees and his hands folded over it. "She would have liked that you tried," he said. They sat together for a while after that. The apartment did what it always did, held them in its particular quiet. The jazz station low on the radio, the sounds of 118th Street coming up through the window. Marcus drank coffee. Elias rested. Neither of them needed to fill the silence with anything. Then Elias said, "You ready to walk?" They went downstairs together, side by side in the elevator, out through the lobby and into the October morning. The air was sharp and clean. Elias stepped onto the sidewalk and set the cane. He squared his shoulders. He smoothed his lapels with his free hand, the good jacket, the navy one with the brass buttons. Marcus watched him do it and felt something very large and very quiet move through his chest. They turned toward 125th Street. What Reverend Whitaker had arranged and had not fully warned them about revealed itself as they rounded the corner. The block was full of people, not a crowd in the rally sense, not signs and sound systems and news cameras on tripods. Something different. Something that had assembled itself out of love rather than logistics. Neighbors standing on their stoops, families on the sidewalk. Former students of Elias, men and women with gray at their temples, who had driven to be on this particular block on this particular morning. Clarence, the fruit vendor, stood in front of his cart, with his apples arranged in neat rows and his hands at his sides. The woman in the green coat, the one who had shouted the day of the arrest, stood near the corner. The barber shop owner stood outside his open door with his arms folded and his chin up. A hand-painted banner stretched between two lampposts, white letters on blue. Elias Caldwell walked here first. Elias could not see any of it, but he heard it. The applause started near the front. Someone near the corner who could not hold it anymore, and then moved down the block like a wave, building as it went until the whole street was giving it back to him. Elias stopped walking. He stood very still for a moment. Then he lifted his face toward the sound. The way a man turns his face toward the sun after a winter that lasted too long. His eyes were closed behind his dark glasses. His hand was steady on the new cane. His shoulders were back. His chin was up. He was not a victim standing on that sidewalk. He had never been a victim. He was Elias James Caldwell, retired principal, husband of Eleanor, father of Marcus, resident of this neighborhood for years. And he was home. Marcus stood beside his father and did not speak. There were no words equal to the moment. He just stood there close enough that their shoulders almost touched and watched the block give his father back his street. Elias took one breath, then another. Then his cane swept forward, measured, confident, certain. And Elias James Caldwell walked his morning route, every crack in the sidewalk exactly where he remembered. Every uneven curb, the fruit stand, the barber shop, the pharmacy on 125th. All of it his, all of it still there, all of it waiting. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.